You're listening to the SSPX Podcast, and today we're introducing a new multi-part series of episodes that we've been working on, the Crisis in the Church series. I had the opportunity to sit down with Father PaulIsaac Franks of the SSPX, who is spearheading this project, about this series, what he hopes to achieve, and what will be included in this nearly 20-episode project. For more information about this, please visit sspxpodcast.com. There you can submit questions to be asked on this series and subscribe to our podcast so that you won't miss any of these episodes. We'll also be putting these episodes on YouTube. Simply search SSPX News English and you'll find all of our videos there as well. Now, here's our conversation with Father Franks.
Well, welcome to an edition of the SSPX Podcast, and we're talking with Father Franks. Hello, Father. How are you?
Hey, Andrew. I'm doing well, thank you.
Very good. Well, this is the first time you and I have talked, and like I mentioned at the top, this is a little bit of an introductory podcast introducing a series that we're going to be starting on the crisis in the church, and it's going to be a multi-part series. But before we dig in and kind of introduce what we're doing, this is the first time you and I have talked on one of these podcasts or one of these videos. So could you let people know who you are?
So I'm Father Paul Franks. I'm originally from England. I was born and raised in England, did my school and so on there. Grew up Catholic, but diocesan Catholic, and discovered the traditional movement when I was in university, and shortly afterwards entered the SSPX seminary in Winona, Minnesota, where I studied for 7 years, being ordained in the last year of the seminary being there in Winona before I moved to Virginia. And then I was assigned in St. Mary's, where I teach in St. Mary's College, teach philosophy and theology, and I look after the mission in Wichita. And this is my 5th year now in St. Mary's, my first assignment as a priest, and I'm very happy here.
Fantastic. Well, and some people may have seen something about you. You did a pretty big bike ride across.
Oh yeah, once upon a time, yeah.
It was what, 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. It was a fundraiser for the Wichita
I don't know. Yeah.
Chapel. Okay. It was what everything seems like a long time ago this year.
Everything does, yeah. No, that was great. That was great fun. I did. Yeah. I rode in England and Scotland about 1,000 miles on my bike.
Wow.
And that was great.
Wow.
It was beautiful.
Great is not the word I would use to describe it, but God bless you for doing that, Father.
No, it was great. It was great. You should come sometime. We should do it.
That sounds great.
If you can get away from your wife.
Yeah, she would be happy. She'd be happy to get rid of me, Father. Well, we are going to be doing this series on the crisis in the church. And Father, you approached me and said, I would love to do this series. I was trying to get you for, I think, 2 years now to come on and do some of our questions with Father and be a regular guest on that.
Yeah,
and you said, hang on, I got a better idea. Why don't we do this series? So could you explain a little bit about this crisis in the church series you wanted to do, Father?
So I wanted to do a kind of systematic presentation of the Society of St. Pius X's assessment of what has happened in the church, what is happening in the church now, and the reasons for that.
Okay.
So something that would really be able to be used as an introduction for inquirers, and also to reinforce and solidify in the minds of people who are already faithful parishioners of the society, what are we doing, why are we doing it, and what is the background to that. Because there are some, even in our own circles, not everybody always takes that much of an interest. Usually that's the way it is. You don't take much of an interest until you're challenged.
Right.
And then sometimes when people are challenged, then they don't know what to say.
Right.
So it's good. I feel like there's a need for a resource, and that this is a perfect medium, in my opinion, to do that.
Fantastic. So this is going to be, I think, 14 or 15 episodes, and maybe more. We'll see.
I don't know how solidified the structure is yet, but
right.
A bunch of episodes. Anyway.
A bunch of episodes. There we go.
Double figures.
Right. And this is, like you said, it's about the crisis in the church. It's about the history behind it, but it's also about the present day. Why does the Society of St. Pius X do this? Why do we have objections to this? are we going to be talking about, well, it's 14, 15, a lot of episodes. We're going to be talking about probably the biggest hits, right? The biggest hits, kind of being the ecumenism, collegiality, those kinds of things from Vatican II, but we're also going to be diving into some other details. Can you kind of give an overview of kind of the topics, what we're going to be talking about?
I mean, a general overview would be starting with the obvious. Is there even a crisis in the church at all? You can't spend 15 episodes talking about it if you don't establish that there's something to talk about.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about really where did it come from historically? So is there's historical background? The crisis didn't come from nowhere. Where do you trace that? That's an interesting conversation we could have. When did the crisis start? That could be a 3-hour debate, between different priests.
Right.
Where did it start? Do you want to go back to the 13th century? Are we talking about the Renaissance? Are we talking about Protestantism? Are we talking about Protestant modernism? Are you talking about the 19th century? Are we talking about liberal Catholicism? All of that stuff. Where did it start? Because one thing's for certain, it didn't just start in 1962.
Right.
And the society has always sort of stood against that idea that the 1950s were a golden era, and if we could just go back to the 1950s, everything would be fine. And we've said, no, if we went back to the 1950s, we would just have Vatican II all over again.
Right.
To realize that there was something wrong, there were problems way before the council that are feeding into this. This is part of a big cultural sweep. And then to talk about how the council unfolded, what really happened there, the preparatory period, the council itself, who were the players, how was power steered, what were the intrigues, what was going on behind the scenes, all that kind of thing.
Sure.
How did it work? How was it able to happen? And then obviously we'll talk about the council, the results of the council, the theological results. Ecumenism, collegiality, religious liberty, the reform of the liturgy, of course, being a big thing to talk about. And then how do we respond now? Since the SSPX judges, there was a break. There was a rupture, a theological rupture. How do we respond to that now? How do we make sense to it? What do we do? What did Archbishop Lefebvre think it his duty to do? Was he justified? Was he justified in his disobedience? Can disobedience, in fact, be justified? Was he justified in his episcopal consecrations? Did he cause a schism? Why do we not obey everything the Pope says? Or on the other hand, why do we think that there still is a Pope?
Right. So
all of those sorts of questions.
In short, this is not a topic that we can just do in one episode. That's why we're thinking double figures.
Double digits. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not something you can just synthesize in one episode and give a sufficient knowledge of. I don't think so. These are deep issues.
Sure, absolutely. So who's the audience, Father? Are we talking to, or who are you hoping is the audience for this series? Is it people who are Catholic and don't even really know there's a crisis? Is it people who are kind of scratching their heads over the last few years, especially during the current pontificate, and saying, there might be something wrong? Or are we talking to the home team? Are we talking to people who already attend an SSPX chapel? Who are you trying to reach? Or D, all the above?
I think that my hope would be that it would be a resource that could be useful to all of the above. So certainly there is a need, as far as our own people goes, there is a need for us to explain more. There's only so much you can give in sermons. There's only so much you can give in catechism classes. Not everybody comes to catechism class. My impression is that fewer and fewer people actually read books. So I think there's more that we have to explain. I don't know if the people who don't come to catechism class also watch YouTube videos, but maybe they do. Maybe they will.
Right.
Maybe they will. And certainly it could be useful to those who are perplexed Catholics who see that there's something amiss and want at least to explore the Society of St. Pius X's position on that as a reference point when they're trying to find their own bearings amidst the various positions which can be adopted in the church today. And certainly something as well that could be of use to somebody who hasn't really considered these issues before and just wants an introduction.
Sure.
So I think in each case, I've even received calls, honestly, since the lockdown. We did our little series in St. Mary's, the Time with Father, and all of us recorded some of those things. I even received a call recently from a woman not even Catholic who's been watching interestedly and is thinking about things.
Fantastic.
As a result of some of those sorts of videos. So who knows what will happen to it? You know, we throw the seed and the Holy Ghost does what he wants with that. But I think it's a good thing to do anyway.
Right. Well, I mean,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if nobody listens to it. It should be there. People should be able to find it if they want it, and that's it.
It's like having a great reference series in a library. Even if no one looks at it, at least it's there for someone to find down the road. For someone like myself, for instance, 38 years old, my parents did all of the hard work, so to speak, of finding tradition. They were the ones who, walked out of their diocesan parish and went to a small chapel in Wisconsin and said, with 5 other people, SSPX priests, will you come and help? Will you come, say mass for us? They did all that work. And I'm kind of role-playing here. I don't need all that. My parents already did that. They did the research and they said, hey, Novus Ordo bad, modernism bad, traditional Latin Mass, good, do this. And I sit here and I say, I agree, and that works. And now I go to this Mass. I don't need to read encyclicals. I don't need Father to talk to me for 16 episodes about this. What do you say to me, Father?
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 things that I would say there. First of all, if we don't have a sufficient reason for being in our position, so understand, you are not in, if you're into the SSPX Mass, you're not in your normal parish. You're not under your normal parish priest. So what is your reason for that? You have to have a reason in conscience. Otherwise, you're just being disobedient. Unless you can give an account of that, then we have issues. That's the first thing. We have to at least be able to give, at a basic level, the reasons for what we're doing. So proportionate to our own understanding.
Sure.
Proportionate to our own understanding. But if you have the capacity to know all sorts of things about politics and physics and football, then you should be able to take an interest, at least to give an account on the same level. You should know at least as much about why you're going to Mass, where you're going to Mass, as you do about the football results.
Sure.
And secondly, because it's for the common good of the Church, and we contend that the traditionalist movement, which is what we're doing in the SSPX, is something not only for us, for our own good, for our own families and so on, but is really something for the good of the Catholic Church. That tradition is meant for the whole Catholic Church, and what the traditional movement seeks to maintain and preserve is meant for the whole Catholic Church, and is indeed the only way for the Catholic Church to find again its way, its bearings, and to be set on the right course. Which means that each Catholic, again in proportion to his abilities and his opportunities, has a certain obligation, at least in charity, to answer the questions of those who inquire.
Sure.
And so we have a duty to inform ourselves so that we can act for the good of the whole Church. And surely you have Catholic friends. Surely you have Catholic friends who may want to ask you, why do you go to Mass there? And you can tell them, oh, my parents made the call back in the 80s and I've never looked back. But and maybe if that's all you're capable of, come and see, it's beautiful, fine. That would be an okay response for somebody who doesn't have the capacity to understand. But if you have the ability to go deeper, and there's more that you could say to help that soul, many people are not going to be persuaded by just what your parents gave you
right.
many years ago. So
right, and they're not going to be just persuaded by come and smell the incense and listen to the bells and the choir.
Oh, they'll go and find people who have better bells and better choir and better incense.
Right. I think Father McFarland, who's going to be one of our speakers on this series, he gave a whole sermon, and the sermon was titled "We're Not Just Here for the Pretty Mass." It's that whole point. This isn't why we're doing this.
No.
So that's a great point, Father. Speaking of Father McFarland, speaking of the other priests, it's not just going to be you and me sitting here doing this. You've gathered a posse, so to speak. You've gathered up a team. So could you introduce who else is going to be doing this series with us, Father?
So Father Paul Robinson, a regular on your podcasts already, on our podcasts, I should say. Obviously a former seminary professor and author of his own recent monograph. And Father Robinson, I think, is known. He'll be an asset to us. Father McFarland, again, who's spoken on the SSPX podcast before, who's rector there down in Phoenix with you, Andrew. Mm-hmm. And then Father Wiseman, currently a professor at the seminary in Virginia. Father McFarland, Father Wiseman, and I were stationed together in St. Mary's, so I'm happy to be working with them again, more closely on this project. Father Reuter, who was just a seminary professor for many years until this year. He's just received his new assignment. And Father Loop, who's down there in Post Falls, principal of a school down there. So that's the team I've gathered together, who's volunteered to help me. I would not have time to do this all on my own, and anyway, it's good for everybody to hear different perspectives, different voices, different faces, and as much variety as we can give when we're talking about some things that may not be the most accessible to everybody. Some people get very excited about these sorts of things. I get very excited about these sorts of things, but not everybody gets very excited about these sorts of things. Well,
and that's why you're a professor at St. Mary's College, Father, because you really get jazzed about this.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's a benefit for us, though. That's good. Well, we're going to be starting to record some of these. We're hopefully going to get a few of these produced and recorded and out there. We're here in the middle of September right now as we introduce this, and hopefully by the beginning of next month, beginning of October, we'll have this, and it will be, again, hopefully, we're living in 2020, Father. Everything is hopefully, right? Everything is under divine providence at this point, but we're going to be releasing these every week or maybe every other week. But it's going to be a long series, but it's going to be something where I think people can share certain episodes, take portions of it, have their friends and family listen to it, and maybe there's a few episodes that you'll really enjoy. And, again, speaking to our listeners, and if you have questions about the crisis, if there's something, again, we're covering everything about the crisis from A to Z. So if you have any questions about it, send them in, and we'll get them to our priest to hopefully have answered eloquently. Right, Father?
I hope so. I mean, I would look forward to taking specific questions, in fact.
Good.
So we'll see.
That'd be great. Well, it's a great experiment, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm looking forward to getting it. Frankly, for myself, I'm excited to start this with you. There's a lot that I know I don't know, and so I'm excited to be in the front row seat and with you, Father, and with our other 5 priests, and I hope our listeners will as well. Okay. So thank you for getting this put together, Father. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. Look forward to it.
All right, thanks.
Hey, God bless.
For more information about this series and all of our podcasts, please visit sspxpodcast.com. There, you can submit questions to be asked on this series or on our Questions with Father series. And you can subscribe to our podcast so that you'll never miss an episode of this series or of any of the other episodes. You'll also be able to view this project on YouTube. Simply search SSPX News English, and you'll find all of our other videos there as well. Just make sure you click the little bell icon. That will subscribe you, and it will make sure that you're notified when the next video comes out. And if you want to support this project, and you have the means to do so, please click on the donate button on sspxpodcast.com. There you'll find information on how to safely, securely, and quickly set up recurring donations. These recurring donations of $5, $10, even $20 a month, if you're able, will help us to make sure that we have the resources necessary to complete these sorts of projects. As you're probably aware, it takes a great amount of time, energy, and resources to put these projects together, so any help would be very much appreciated. And you don't have to set up a monthly donation. Just a one-time donation will work too. And if you don't have the means, that's fine. You can support this project by leaving a review or by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Stitcher or wherever you're listening. And it helps us out a lot by subscribing to the podcast as well. So just go to your favorite app or program for podcasts and search SSPX and click subscribe. In the meantime, thank you for listening. God bless you. And we will talk with you next time on episode 1 on the Crisis in the Church series.